Gentlemen, a very pleasant good afternoon to you and welcome to the Dwight David Eisenhower Army Medical Center. Please rise for honors for the Honorable Norman R. Augustine, Assistant Secretary of the Army for Research and Development, and for the other distinguished platform guests. Please remain standing for the invocation and the national anthem. Chaplain William P. Webb will now give the invocation.
Let us pray. Almighty God, the beauty of thy creation is marvelous to behold. And today we give thee thanks for creating such a place, such a beautiful place, in which we could erect a building in memory of a great American. And now, Father, as we come to dedicate this building, we seek thy blessings. Today it is just a building. May it become a monument of hope. Today it is empty, but soon it will be filled with people seeking help. They will come seeking help and cures for illness. They will seek comfort in pain and peace for troubled minds. And we pray, O God, that thou shalt help us to help them. For this is the purpose for this building, and to this end we dedicate it in thy holy name. Amen.
Please be seated. General Meyer. General Meyer, the post commander and the commandant of the Army Signal School, will now give us our welcome address.
Ladies and gentlemen, military and civilian friends of Fort Gordon and the central Savannah River area, I would like to read to you a quote by a previous president. Americans want a good standard of living, not simply to accumulate possessions, but to fulfill a legitimate aspiration for an environment in which their families may live meaningful and happy lives. Our people are committed, therefore, to the creation and preservation of opportunity for every citizen, opportunity to lead a more rewarding life. They are equally committed to an alleviation of unavoidable misfortune and distress among their fellow citizens. That quote was by the 34th President of the United States, Dwight David Eisenhower. And I think it captures more than anything else the true reason why there could be no more fitting person to which this new hospital could be dedicated. From the time that the first ground was broken here, roughly 4 years ago to this day, until the present, there has been a countless number of people that have contributed to the successful completion of this project. More than time would ever permit to be mentioned individually. But during that period of time, which has seen so much new growth at Fort Gordon, I think it is only fitting and proper that our post should prosper and progress so well so that it might match the enthusiasm and the support that has always been rendered by the civilian community of the central Savannah River area. And by combining the best of both those worlds, this dedication today is a reality. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome you on this most festive and important occasion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General Meyer. It is with great pleasure that I introduce some of our distinguished guests in the audience. I will introduce our platform guests later in the program. If the following would please rise as their names are called so that we may recognize them. Lieutenant General Leonard D. Heaton, retired. Retired Surgeon General of the Army. Lieutenant General and Mrs. Hal B. Jennings, retired Surgeon General. My wife gave me heck last time because I didn't introduce her, so since she's sitting there, I'll introduce her now. Mrs. Winnie Myers. Major General Robert Bernstein, Commander of Walter Reed Army Medical Center. Brigadier General Lillian Dunlap, Chief Army Nurse Corps. State Representative Robert Beckham. State Representative Warren Evans. Mayor and Mrs. Lewis Newman of Augusta. Mayor and Mrs. Raymond Walters of North Augusta. Richmond County Commission Chairman, Mr. Ed McIntyre. Columbia County Commissioner, Chairman and Mrs. John Blanchard. Aiken County Commission Chairman and Mrs. Harold Graybill. Mr. Virgil Smith, Administrative Assistant to Governor Busby and representing the Governor today. In addition, we have several members of our project team here that I would like to make cognizance of. Lieutenant Colonel Gladys Rafferty and Major and Mrs. David Kitchen. Those two people, along with Colonel Paco, who you will meet later on, have had the job of getting this building constructed, at least from the advisory point of view. In addition, we have many other distinguished guests from the medical facilities and businesses within the greater Augusta and central Savannah River area, as well as commanders from Fort Gordon and from all of the military medical facilities throughout the southeastern United States who have joined us today. At this time, I would like to introduce Lieutenant General Richard R. Taylor, the Surgeon General. General Taylor was born in Prairiesburg, Iowa. He attended the University of Chicago, got his medical degree at the University of Chicago Medical School in 1946. Interned in California, trained in the Army, has served many places throughout the world, belongs to the American College of Physicians, the American College of Chest Physicians, the American Medical Association, the New York Academy of Science. He is board certified in internal medicine, attended the Command and General Staff School, the Army War College, and one of his last assignments before becoming the Surgeon General of the Army, he was the Deputy Surgeon General of the Army under General Jennings, General Taylor.
General Meyer, General White, Ambassador Eisenhower, Mr. Stevens, Secretary Augustine, General Westmoreland, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure for me to be here today to participate in this ceremony. Tuesday night, I saw Mamie Eisenhower at Walter Reed before I left Washington. She deeply regrets not being here. She is doing much better medically, and her spirits are great. 200 years ago, on the 27th of July, 1775, the Army Medical Department was created by an act of the Continental Congress. Through these 200 years, the Army Medical Department has served to conserve the fighting strength of our nation. On the 27th of July this year, the Army Medical Department will be rededicating our efforts to those that we serve. The soldier, his or her dependents, the dependents of soldiers who have died of wounds and sickness, and the retired and their dependents as authorized by law. Today is an occasion that stands as an important moment for the Army and for the years ahead. Within these walls are the tools, the equipment, and the design that will enable us to offer unparalleled care to those that we serve. But this magnificent building is only a structure, for it is the dedicated health professionals, the team, and the supporting staff that can turn this building into a hospital, a live, vigorous, and competent institution concerned with the health of people. Some of the diversity and complexity of any modern hospital is apparent to most patients and visitors. Yet, there is so much more that is not apparent. Healthcare professionals are more aware, by the very nature of their training and experience, of the many details that make a modern hospital work, and they are less awed by the equipment. However, none of us can help but be impressed by what we have in this hospital today, and to be deeply grateful for the many good people who combine their talents, their energies, and time to make this a reality. The parts that make up this structure are many. Modern surgical suites, computerized record systems, closed circuit TV for medical education, a largely automated pathology laboratory, large therapeutic pool, modern x-ray equipment, cobalt-60 treatment units, to mention but a few. All of these details add up to one of better care for the soldiers and the families of those who died, knowing that their loved ones' health care needs would be met. The scene was much different 33 years ago when Camp Gordon was reactivated. A contingent of medical and dental officers arrived on a bleak December day to find the station hospital under construction. The floors were being laid. Lumber and ladders were all along the corridors, and the painting was just begun. There was no water, no light or heat. A temporary dispensary had been set up in another area, and supplies were borrowed from nearby military facilities. It was a time of uncertainty and apprehension. It was December 1941, and our country was responding to the shock of Pearl Harbor. The needs for expansion of hospital facilities was evident. In January 42, 1 month later, 535 patients were received at this hospital. By the end of that year, over 11,000 patients had been admitted for treatment. During World War II, the station hospital reached a peak of about 120 wooden buildings with a 2,000-bed capacity. It was a difficult period. If there was a motto for the hospital at that time, it might well have been make do. And they did make do with dedication and compassion. Today, we face other problems, different yet urgent ones. We are in a period of major national change. Our country's inflation demands economy and effective use of the resources that are entrusted to us, and a spirit of can-do. This medical center will help us towards that goal, and we are thankful to those serving in Congress of the United States who have appreciated our needs here at Fort Gordon. We particularly appreciate Congressman Robert Stevens' presence here today. Now, this facility is strategically located for regionalization in southeast United States. It will be supporting the United States Army in the southeastern United States, Canal Zone, and Puerto Rico. And at the same time, we'll be supporting the Department of Defense tri-state area, that is Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida, on a tri-service role. This latter responsibility is one of increasing importance as we strive to provide high-quality care with increasing efficiency for all Department of Defense beneficiaries. Thus, we have both intra-Army and intra-service healthcare coordination and cooperation to spread the workload to ensure the best utilization of the specialists and the special capabilities that we have on a regional basis, of sharing the special treatment facilities and equipment and educational opportunities for all. Now, this inter-service cooperation is based on the goodwill and conscientious efforts of all of us, from my office, where I meet with the Surgeons General of the Navy and Air Force, as do my staff, to each regional center, which this is now, and each hospital of the Army and Navy and Air Force, where many, if not most, of the innovations and improvements must and should originate. The opportunities for improvement will be strengthened through postgraduate educational programs planned for the Dwight David Eisenhower Army Medical Center, beginning with family practice residencies and later adding residency programs in pediatrics, general medicine, general surgery, obstetrics and gynecology, and psychiatry, and others as needed. We will be able to develop a medical center here. It will require time, but the time to start is today. In the Army Medical Department today, major efforts are underway to increase the number of physicians trained and certified in family practice to better serve our Army community. Now, this is a modern version of care envisioned in the words family doctor or general practitioner of earlier years, a commodity which is disappearing from our nation. Today's family practitioners, however, will have resources undreamt of by his predecessors, as well as the services of the specialists in closely allied affiliation. The importance of a relationship between a physician and the patient is obvious. Similarly, the interrelationship between the military medical facility and civilian medical community is important and self-evident. Unfortunately, this importance is overlooked sometimes in the daily give and take of our lives. An occasion such as this helps us to reaffirm that fact. At Fort Gordon, we are particularly fortunate in enjoying a high degree of professional enrichment from the area's healthcare facilities and individual civilian healthcare professionals. This medical center will serve as an added stimulus to strengthen and extend this relationship. Brief mention has been made of our debt to those who helped to bring this hospital into being. Time does not permit me to identify all that have been involved, but certainly I would be remiss if I didn't note the special contribution of the late Senator Richard Russell, Senator Strom Thurmond, Senator Herman Talmadge, Lieutenant General Leonard D. Heaton, and Lieutenant General Hal B. Jennings. Also the support of many good people of the greater Augusta area, such as Mr. Lou Harris and Mr. Sherman Dottie. And there are many more. And today, as we dedicate this hospital, it is only fitting to contemplate that it is the dedication of people that brought this hospital into being, and at the same time, it is the dedication of people that will give meaning to its function in healthcare service. The word dedication was probably not used much by General Eisenhower. He didn't need to. He lived a life of dedication, of service to his country and to us, the people. His accomplishments need not be enumerated here. His deeds are well known. His presence and personality are still vivid before us. He was a familiar figure, familiar here in Augusta. He loved this area, and he came here to relax from the cares and worries of his office. His enthusiasm for life and its situations continued unabated in the years after his presidency. Most of us lived through the Eisenhower years. Some of us shared the events of World War II, the Cold War, Korea, and the intervening years. The public figure is often seen as the reflection of the media. Sometimes we see a more direct image through his speeches or writings. Many of us have shared the events of World War II with General Eisenhower through his book, Crusade in Europe, and learned much of his activities as the Supreme Allied Commander. A more personal touch was revealed, however, in his book, At Ease, Stories I Tell My Friends, published in 1967. These are interesting stories, and they link together and describe the stages of life of this great man. In the hospital's lobby, there is a memorial which will soon be unveiled to General Eisenhower, donated by his friends in the greater Augusta area. A portion of his farewell address to the Army, given here at Fort Gordon before he left the presidency, is carved in stone. In his autobiography, he wrote of his optimism and the need for goodwill, cooperation, and patience. And then somewhat sadly noted, I fear that we too often lay stress on words than on the stark necessity of deeds to back them up. Let us, upon the dedication of the Dwight David Eisenhower Army Medical Center, consider these words. Let us order our priorities for those deeds that will help us to achieve our noble goals, now and in the future. And it will be a fitting and living memorial for his service to the peoples of this nation. Thank you.
We are indeed privileged to have General William C. Westmoreland as the man who will deliver the eulogy for General Eisenhower. As a native of South Carolina, General Westmoreland is certainly as well known as any other American in these parts. And a military career that includes graduating from the military academy and later serving as superintendent at the academy, that spans all of the major wars since World War II, a career that culminated with the commander-in-chief of all of the U.S. forces in our very trying conflict in Vietnam, and finally as the Chief of Staff of the Army before continuing his dedicated service as a civilian back in his native state of South Carolina. Not only that, but I think it's rather fitting that General Westmoreland should be with us on this occasion because he seems to have a penchant for being around Fort Gordon whenever we get ready to put up any multi-story buildings. We have two on post, the signal towers and the Dwight David Eisenhower Medical Center. He cut the ribbon on the tower. He was present circling overhead when the first ground was broken 4 years ago, but never managed to get on the ground. And it is a distinct pleasure to know that he has finally landed to be here to deliver the eulogy for President and General Eisenhower. You know, although General Eisenhower was a general and a president, he was known by and large to everybody, and always will be, as Ike, because he was a soldier's soldier. And we are particularly pleased to speak on General Eisenhower's behalf, another soldier's soldier, General Westmoreland.
Mr. Secretary, Ambassador Eisenhower, General Meyer, General White, General Taylor, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. General Meyer is quite right. 4 years ago, yesterday, on the 23rd of April, 1971, I was scheduled as Army Chief of Staff to speak at the groundbreaking ceremonies here for this building. But after we got in the air and approached the state of Georgia, having just traversed the great state of South Carolina, a front moved in. There was a terrific rainstorm. There was a 50-mile-an-hour crosswind on your airfield, and we were unable to land at the airfield. It was closed to all traffic. Now, being an old-time paratrooper, my first thought was to jump. But I couldn't find a parachute in the whole airplane. Now, last evening, General Meyer discussed this incident in a little more detail, and he accused me of being in the fog. But he didn't imply that I had remained in that condition ever since, for which I am grateful. I don't know whether you realize it or not, but we are breaking tradition today. Ladies and gentlemen, this will be the first time the Army has named a leading medical facility after a president, and for that matter, after anyone but a medical man. But let me state that the decision to dedicate this facility to Ike was as sound as the decision to build the hospital in the first place. There are a host of reasons why that is so. Because Ike was always interested in people. And this center has no purpose but to help people. He was a great American soldier, and this center is the foremost such facility in the American Army. He loved this area. And he spent a great deal of time here, as much as he could. And he will always be here in spirit. And now he will be here personified by this great building and this wonderful hospital. Now, when he was seriously ill in 1965, he was hospitalized in the old wooden structure, which I understand is being held together by the termites holding hands. This brand new Ephesus will certainly replace that unsatisfactory facility. And of course, as you well know, Miss Mamie was recently hospitalized here, and we're all rejoiced, of course, in the fact that she is now doing well. I can't help but think that General Ike would be pleased with this new building, which is only a 5-iron shot from his own room. Now, all his life, he was fond of soldiers. His message to the Army before he left the White House was delivered at a review for him right here at Fort Gordon in January 1961. And the last reason I should mention is that the wonderful people of Augusta wanted it that way. When the local citizens learned that Fort Gordon was to be the site of a great new Army hospital, a spontaneous movement arose to name it and honor our President Eisenhower. The Army couldn't have said no even if it wanted to, but indeed, the Army wanted it also named, as General Heaton can attest to, for the 34th President of the United States. Dwight David Eisenhower was one of those rare men whose accomplishments are bigger than life. In the vernacular of today, a recital of his achievements does boggle the mind. It's not easy to grasp the essence of this extraordinary person. He did so much, yet he remained so human. He rose to great heights, but he never had his head in the clouds. He was never in the fog. Perhaps that's why Americans and the citizens of the world loved him so much. And that's who I think this center was named for. Not especially the 34th President of the United States, not this nation's highest-ranking military officer, not the leader of the free world, but the man who was all of those, the man we simply called Ike. It was his human qualities which endeared him to us, and that we most remember. Born and raised in the heartland of America, he had a humility, a strength, a character, a compassionate understanding for his fellow man. Integrity was in his bones. He never lost those qualities through all the years of fame and influence. Americans first came to know him as General Eisenhower, the commander of the mightiest armed force ever assembled in the cause of freedom, the leader of our crusade in Europe. But the greatness did not come to him by accident. Sometimes we fail to appreciate that he spent a quarter of a century preparing himself for the ultimate role he was to assume in the service of his country. And in spite of the many disappointments along the way, he never wavered in his dedication. During the period between the two world wars, the Army almost withered away. Its strength dropped to not much over 100,000 men. Its equipment was non-existent or obsolete. The question in those days was not whether we were number one or number two. We ranked way down in the list of third-rate military powers. Promotions were at a standstill, and some officers were furloughed without pay. It was a discouraging time. I know, I remember it, because I was a second lieutenant in those days. General Eisenhower himself, at the age of 45, and with over 20 years of service, was still a major. He was thinking of retirement as a lieutenant colonel when World War II broke out. His subsequent rapid rise in rank is a credit to the Army's promotion system. What is usually left unsaid, though, is his unstinting loyalty and dedication during the long and lean years before the call to greatness came. History does not so often remind us of the ties of duty to country which kept him in uniform during a period when the Army was looked upon as a distasteful burden by the very society its members had sworn to defend. But Ike stuck with it and pulled unpleasant duty and tolerated slow advancement. And he was ready when his country needed him in time of trouble. After World War II, he came, and we came to know him as President Eisenhower. He was, in truth, the president of all the people. His tremendous political success was largely a personal triumph, for he stood aloof from partisan problems and political maneuvering. His unassuming sincerity and infectious smile gained for him the overwhelming confidence and respect of our citizenry at a time when the nation sorely needed such reassuring inspiration. "I like Ike" became a national slogan. People liked him because they sensed that he genuinely liked them. He cared. During his tenure in office, our country knew a sense of well-being and an inner calmness that we have not known or had not known for years before, and we have not known since. When we now speak of the good old days, it is as often as not the Eisenhower years we refer to. This is the way he described it, and I quote, "When I came to the presidency, this country was in rather an unhappy state," he said. "There was bitterness and there was quarreling. I tried to create an atmosphere of greater serenity and mutual confidence, and I think that it was noticeable that over those 8 years that was brought about." Now, typically his entry into politics was made reluctantly. He stated himself that he thought it completely absurd to mention his name in the same breath as the presidency. But the people of this nation thought otherwise. He was their overwhelming choice, and the people were not wrong. In the Army, leaders are called the captain and the colonel. If one is admired and respected by the men, he will be called the old man. The highest accolade of all, however, is to be referred to as our captain or our colonel. To the people of the United States, Ike was our president, and we were proud of him. And we were proud of Mrs. Eisenhower, Miss Mamie, the First Lady. But whether we called him General or Mr. President, we really thought of him as a warm human being, because he was. And the real Ike always showed through the trappings of office. That was probably his real genius. The ability to be genuine and unaffected regardless of the circumstances. We saw him also as a family man, a devoted father and grandfather, and a loving and thoughtful husband. It's especially good that John could be here today. And of course, the magnificent spirit of Miss Mamie is also here today. But we're saddened that she could not be here in good health. As I'm sure you know, Miss Mamie cared for this country as did her husband, and still does. She was recently hospitalized here in the same place where her husband was hospitalized a number of years ago. As we honor General Eisenhower's devoted service to his country, we also pay tribute to that gracious lady, Miss Mamie. The Dwight David Eisenhower Army Medical Center is a befitting tribute to a great man who all his life had compassion and understanding for his fellow man. It will be more than a monument, this hospital. It will be a living memorial in the most literal sense, for its mission is to foster health and to save lives. It is fitting, too, that a granite block made of Georgia granite, of course. In the lobby of the second floor, donated by the citizens of Augusta, should have chiseled on it the words Ike spoke when he stood here 14 years ago and bid his farewell to the Army. He began his long service to his country as an officer in the Army, and he thought of himself as a soldier, just as a soldier. Right here, near the spot, on this military reservation, after that last review, he said, and I quote, "This morning, as I have this chance to say goodbye to you, I hope that you will understand that my heart will always be filled with admiration for you. And there will be in my soul a certain nostalgia as I see a uniform, whether it be a single soldier on the streets or when I see a unit passing in parade." Eisenhower the general, Eisenhower the president, Eisenhower the world leader, they will never be forgotten. But oftentimes history loses sight of the person behind the fame, of the man beneath the statue. This medical center, a humanitarian institution, will serve to remind us of the human side of a great human being. It speaks of Eisenhower the man. He would have liked that. Thank you.
Thank you, General Westmoreland. Ladies and gentlemen, it is really a great pleasure for me to introduce our next speaker, the Honorable John S. Dowd Eisenhower. The Honorable Eisenhower is a son, a true son of his father. He was born in Denver, Colorado, followed in his father's footsteps, attended the military academy, later on received his MA degree at Columbia University. Shortly after his graduation from West Point, he served in Europe as a true soldier, as his father had. Returned, became an instructor at the military academy, had many assignments to include field service with the 3rd Infantry Division, then staff assignments with the Joint War Plans Army General Staff. He attended the Command and General Staff College, the Industrial College of the Armed Forces, and later decided that maybe the grass was greener on the other side of the fence. I haven't asked him that, but maybe that's what he thought. He resigned from the Army, retired from the Army, and in 1969 went to further goals by becoming the ambassador to Belgium. Since his resignation, he has kept up his reserve component and has served in many positions in the military reserves, to include the Reserves Component Personnel and Administration Center, and in June of '74 was promoted to Brigadier General in the Reserve Army Corps. At this time, I would like to introduce the Honorable John S. Dowd Eisenhower.
General Meyer, General White, distinguished guests, all of you. It's a great honor and a great privilege for me to be here today to represent the Eisenhower clan at this proceedings, which is so tremendously important to our family. I know that you all are quite anxious for a 2-hour discourse, but I'm afraid that you're doomed to a little disappointment, because the only thing I pride myself on in my public speaking is brevity. If I did have a lot to say, though, it's just as well, because with such an act to follow as the preceding speeches, There's not much more for me to say, and frankly, I am so touched by the whole thing that I probably wouldn't do very well. The Eisenhower family, with me as representative, I can't tell you how proud we are that the Army and the Army Medical Corps and the people of Augusta and whoever was involved did see fit to name this tremendous institution after my father. General Heaton today at noon gave me some background on how it happened, but whoever was involved, let me express the gratitude of the family for this recognition. There's no doubt in the world but what this institution here would have been my father's favorite memorial if he were in the business of picking out his memorials. It's so much more significant than a big hunk of marble, which is a useless thing. Here is an institution where professionals will work to improve themselves, and more important, to take care of those people that my father loved most, the members of the armed services, especially the Army, of course, and their families. This is the kind of memorial that would have touched him most. The only other thought, I really do wish that my mother could have been here. She is doing well, but she's just not strong enough to be here today. And the idea sort of hit me last night when we were talking to so many people, how much she would have enjoyed not only the ceremony, not only would she have been impressed so much by so many people who have taken the trouble to come all this distance for this ceremony, but how many old friends who are very near to her she would have liked to have seen. I could mention General Heaton, General Mrs. Westmoreland, Cliff Roberts, I understand he's here somewhere. All the good people of Augusta. There I have to stop because there are so many people who are really close to my mother's heart in this crowd today that the list would be too long to mention, and I wouldn't know where to stop. She would have been thrilled. This would have been one of the high moments of her life. She will be thrilled anyway when we tell her about this ceremony. General Westmoreland said he's going to call her this evening. I'll call her later. She'll be thrilled to hear about it, and that would have to be second best as far as she's concerned. I'd like to just close by saying once again, thank you all for being here. We're extremely proud of this whole thing, and God bless you all.
Thank you very much, John. We are privileged to have Mr. Norman R. Augustine, the Honorable Assistant Secretary of the Army for Research and Development, representing the Office of the Secretary of the Army with us this afternoon. A man who is a native of Colorado, was a graduate of Princeton University, who has had a myriad of positions in both industry and the government, starting his service with the government in 1965, and for the last year and a half has held his present position as the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Research and Development. Norman tells me that he's visiting Fort Gordon and the Augusta community for the first time, and we are pleased not only to have him here, but also to show him some of our typical Southern hospitality for which I think our area is so well noted. Mr. Augustine?
Thank you, General Meyer. It's always a pleasure to salute a major past accomplishment. It's also always a pleasure to salute a major future undertaking. Today, I think we're doubly privileged to be able to take note of both a major event of the past and at the same time the beginning of an even greater challenge and a greater opportunity to serve for the future. The Army has, of course, very long been proud of its accomplishments in the field of medicine, spanning all the way from basic work in the field of surgery, work on malaria, work going on today in the treatment of burns and many other areas. Turning to a broader topic, that of the Army as a whole, as we approach our 200th birthday in the next few weeks, I'm happy to be able to report to you that every day it seems that the indications are that our Army is getting better and better. I need not tell you how disappointed Secretary Callaway is that he couldn't be here today to be a part of this occasion. I would, however, like to read a brief message that he sent and ask that it be conveyed to you. It goes as follows. Greetings to those in attendance for the dedication of the Dwight David Eisenhower Army Medical Center. It is my pleasure to add a personal word on this momentous occasion and to salute those whose vision and tireless energy have brought us this modern and much-needed structure. It is only fitting that this medical center should bear the name of our revered former Commander-in-Chief. I trust that those assigned to this facility will be guided by General Eisenhower's unsurpassed devotion and service to his country and his fellow man. I regret that I could not have personally joined you for the dedication ceremony, and I thank you for manifesting your interest and your concern by your presence. Signed, Bo Callaway, Secretary of the Army. On behalf of the Army as a whole, I'd like to congratulate those whose work that we see before us today is now complete. I'd like to offer our support and our encouragement to those whose work is about to begin. Thank you very much.
General White, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Greater Augusta Fort Gordon chapter of the Association of the United States Army, and also the staff of the Eisenhower Medical Center, it's my pleasure to present a plaque to Ambassador Eisenhower for his mother, Mrs. Mamie Dowd Eisenhower. This plaque is made of black granite, the same type of granite used in making the Eisenhower Memorial, which will be unveiled soon. Etched and carved into the granite is the artist's conception of the new medical center. The brass plaque attached to the plaque reads, Mrs. Mamie Dowd Eisenhower, to Mrs. Mamie Dowd Eisenhower at the dedication of the Dwight David Eisenhower Army Medical Center, 24 April 1975, from the Greater Augusta Fort Gordon Chapter, Association of the United States Army. Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foster. I'll deliver this to Mother, and she'll really be thrilled with it. Thank you.
Oh, don't do it.